Good evening, brothers and sisters. Good evening. How are you? You good? You need to stretch? That was a pretty energetic song. Maybe we can just talk to maybe whoever's sitting right next to you and just say, she looks like she's not going to be painless. We can do this. Come on, do it. Thank you. Just to get started here. So just now we looked at loving God, right? So what's that greatest commandment again in its whole? Somebody, come on, we just had it. Loving God is loving God with all your heart, with all your mind, with all your strength, and with your soul. Thank you. And then we're going to look at this evening also is the second commandment, which is loving the neighbor as ourselves. So loving thy neighbor, together with loving God, form the core of Christian life. Jesus summed up the whole law into these two great commandments. So, in that passage, in that longer passage, if you read further into the Bible, it really talks about loving God and loving thy neighbor as being together. Or if we were even going to look at all the 10 commandments and we were going to sum it up into two, these are really the two top things that we have to remember, because everything that's dictated by all our words, actions, thoughts, and decisions really originates from love. So the two together, it's clear that to love others or to have no love for others is not Christianity at all. So in John chapter, this is the second commandment. So in John chapter 4, verses 20 through 21, it says, if someone says, I love God and hates his brother, he is a liar. For the one who does not love his brother, whom he has seen, cannot love God, whom he has not seen. And this commandment we have from him, that the one who loves God should love his brother also. And the key word there is commandment. It was a commandment. And when you say command, it's really not, he's asking nicely, or he's, just optional, only if you feel like it. Commandment truly is a strong order from our God. Not that it doesn't come with love, not that it's just all command. It's a commandment. It's a strong encouragement. It's a strong rearing or upbringing of love into our hearts. He truly is asking us to love like Him. And to understand how we can love our brothers and sisters who truly are our neighbors, perhaps we need to understand first what love is not. And we have five main things to describe what love is not. And number one is that love is not only having positive feelings, right? You guys should probably know that by now, that love is not equated with feelings alone, or, it's not equated with just physical or sexual attraction alone, or personal affection, right? Because feelings what? Feelings change. Feelings could change at any time. So it can't be the whole basis or the sole basis of love. It may follow true love, but love is not just necessarily equal to feelings alone. When Jeff and I first met, this was like 94, 95, I never really thought he was my type. He had this really long hair in ponytail, which really I was never a big fan of long hair. It just looks like he's not showering, it looks crazy to me. And so he had long hair and he was wearing flat shirts all the time. Oh, he's still wearing flat shirts. But we've become friends. This was like, 20 years ago. We've become friends. And then in the early stages of our dating or getting to know each other, we probably started thinking, oh, he's interesting. He's a nice guy. I think I like him. Or, this guy's very intelligent. I think I'm really impressed. Or, and then I kind of started thinking to myself, I really want to get to know him better. Although I'm quite confident that he liked me first before I liked him. So as we got to know each other more and more over the 6 years that we dated, and we supported each other through our life's ups and downs, the commitment and the decision to love grew stronger and stronger until, he proposed, and we made a stronger commitment to love each other through marriage. Again, the big word there is commitment. When you say commitment, in talk number 5, we just heard that God really gave us free will. And what that free will is, He didn't make us robots so that what He says we just follow or we just do. He gave us free will so that we would recognize His goodness and His graciousness so that we can respond with that same love. And so with that free will, in going into relationships and in any kind of relationship that we have, we make that decision, that commitment to love. So, and after being married for almost 12 years now, as many of you married people would agree, problems, challenges will continue to come. But it's that commitment, again, it's that big word commitment to continue to love that keeps us intact. Some singles are actually having conversations on the side. They probably could relate to that. Again, another component that love is not always just saying yes. Do you agree? Because to love others, you don't always have to say yes, right? Sometimes you're not able to do what they're asking, or sometimes even if you're able to do it, you just should not, right? I mean, I'm sure those of you who are parents here would agree or could attest to this. Why do you not buy your children all the latest gadgets or the latest toys just because they ask? Why? Perhaps you want to teach them self-control, right? Or perhaps the value of money. You want them to teach the value of money, or at least put in some effort. Perhaps it's related to having good grades or accomplishing something meaningful before they get something so material. So we have to be careful about that, because I know these days all these latest gadgets, latest toys are so accessible. Little kids now feel like they deserve the latest and greatest, iPads or iPhones. So again, we don't always say yes, because we have to define it for them. We have to define what it means. We have we have a wrong concept of love. If we're defining a person as just a nice guy or a nice girl who tries to please everybody, right? If anything, it should be pleasing God first. Brother Bong mentioned earlier that his kids love me because I make cake pops, right? And so a few years ago, this was close to Mother's Day, I have a lot of orders for cake pops and cupcakes, and they were all needed to be delivered around Mother's Day. And Mother's Day is around the time too in our church when confirmations and first communions happen. And one of my nephews back then, Kevin, he was scheduled to have his confirmation that same Mother's Day. And so as the day was approaching, and I knew this way back, 2 years before he even got confirmed, because it's a 2-year program, so I knew it was coming. But I got so busy with my business, and I'm like, how do I do this? How am I going to make it to his confirmation when I've committed? I've already committed to all these cupcake orders. And then Kevin was even telling me, well, Tita Maico, you don't even need to go to my confirmation. You can just give me $50 and, we're even. And then, well, aside from the fact that I would not pay $50 for almost anything, I just, in my heart, in my gut, I was just like, that's not what I want. That's not what I want to teach him. That's not how I want to please the situation. I have 7 nephews here, going on 8 nephews. And if you ask any of them who their coolest aunt is, my name probably wouldn't come up. Because I'm not Auntie Maico who easily melts when they're asking for something, or I'm not Auntie Myra who takes them to snowboarding and beach trips all the time. I'm Auntie Maico who always, when I see them, I say, oh, how are you? How's school? What are you doing? Or when they're telling me about their latest and greatest stuff, I'm like, but that's so expensive. You could have gone out for a Target for like so much cheaper. I swear I'm not a Target endorser, but I love Target. But then 2 years before that confirmation, when he was asked who he wanted to be his sponsor, the one who's supposedly responsible for guiding him in his spiritual life as he moves forward, he didn't hesitate for a second to answer Auntie Maico. And so as I was making all that cupcake, and I was still having my scheduled dilemma of having to deliver the many orders that I committed to, I just prayed to God. I prayed and prayed, God, make this happen for me. I know I've made this commitment for all these cupcakes, and I can't miss my nephew's confirmation, but it was really looking impossible. And so I prayed and I prayed, and I was making, those little cupcakes overnight. I didn't sleep that Friday night. And because of that, I was able to make it to his confirmation right in time, like just as they were parading, because I had the delivery in the morning, just as they were parading into the church, I was able to kind of like walk next to him. And you don't ask me if I took a shower because I didn't, but I made it. I made it this confirmation. So I honor each and every one of you who are here tonight because of the so many things that you could do tonight that are pleasing to you, that's more pleasing to you. You chose to be here tonight. And again, with my nephew situation, I could have easily decided to just, okay, give him $50 and we're even. And that would have pleased him, right? But maybe just temporarily. I was glad I was able to be there and really made him feel, I feel like the commitment to be there and actually being present there, no matter if I was dressed or not for the occasion, I feel like that's gonna last longer in his mind rather than the $50 I would have given him. So moving on. So love is not only having positive feelings. That's number one. Number two is love is not always saying yes. So number three is love is not defensive. Love can be tricky at times, right? Because love, you know, what if someone betrays you? I'm sure some of you have felt betrayed at one point in your life. You know, sometimes it's even more hurtful when it's done by your closest family, by your closest friends, or sometimes even just our colleagues. What if your loved one dies? Sometimes that comes with a lot of pain that sometimes it's hard to understand why they have to go away. So it's almost like love is setting us up to get hurt. Well, Christian love is not guaranteed to be painless, but pain is endured through commitment and the injury sustained through forgiveness, forbearance, and all those other things that God has given us. Again, commitment through pain. I had a really meaningful Lent this year. You know, there are years when you're kind of like just going through the routine of what's required for Lent. You know, like you're going through the stations with the cross or maybe giving up something throughout Lent. So I would do that most of the time, but this year was different for me. You know, my relationship with my dad has been broken, I want to say, since I was 17, and I'm 38 now, so that's more than 20 years ago. And you know, since then, you know, I've been so apart from him, and the regular demands of life and just the regular, you know, goals of achieving life, my own life now as an adult, and as you know, having my own family and my own marriage. Sometimes I even forget that I still have a dad because he's so far away. But earlier this year, I got a call. You know, since then, my relationship with him is what you might call, you know, cordial or civil. But nothing more than that. We'd say hi, we'd greet each other on special occasions if we remember. But earlier this year, I got a call that he was being rushed to the hospital, that he's got a lot of urgent conditions and needed to be attended to with many surgeries and many other procedures. And that froze me for a little bit. So I immediately called him, and you know, he does FaceTime too. And you know, when you don't see your dad regularly, you see them all of a sudden at their lowest in the time of their sickness. It was hard because it was a FaceTime, and so I saw him, and my dad, whom I've always known as this strong, this proud, this boastful, very dominating guy. All of a sudden, what I saw was his vulnerability, his weakness, and then over these years, it was almost a speechless conversation. And even when he wasn't really saying the words, "I'm sorry," that particular FaceTime conversation, I felt it. I felt he was asking forgiveness. I felt like he was expressing his love for me all through these years. I feel like I felt he was trying to make up for the many years that we were apart. And so it was short. It was a brief conversation, but it felt long in a way because we weren't saying a lot of words. But I saw him, he looks a lot thinner, he looks a lot weaker than what I really knew he was as a 17-year-old back then. And so then, you know, it was 2 hours before he was pulled into surgery. And then I said, in my mind, you know, my mind was just spinning and said, what am I gonna say, what am I gonna do? But boom, all of a sudden, I said it. I said, "Pa," and I called him Papa. I said, "Pa, you're gonna get out of this surgery, okay?" And I knew he was, you know, if there was anything I would remember as a 17-year-old, I knew he had low tolerance to pain because I inherited that. I'd have a little headache and I'll let Papa Tylenol in. So I knew that about him. And so I knew how much fearful he was about this surgery. And so I said, Pa, I think you're gonna get out of the surgery, okay? And then boom, I said, I love you, Pa. I said that. And so as that conversation happened, I was just thinking to myself, and it was Lenten season, it made it really meaningful for me. Because I never really knew there was room in my heart to forgive or to express my love that much. Growing up, one of my greatest fear, as an adult, was not feeling anything. If I even, when the time comes that I have to hear that he's gone, they get old, and that's truly what happens to all of us. But just at that moment, when I said I love you, and I hung up the phone, and I knew he had to hang up too, because he was starting to cry, and he was starting to, and he wouldn't show that vulnerability. He was a very proud man all my life, and but as we hung up the phone, I was crying, but I could not do anything else but praise God for allowing that kind of forgiveness, that kind of love flow into my heart despite the many, many years of hurt. And so I just really praise God for that. So that is love not being defensive. So number 4 that love is that love is not self-seeking. So the focus of loving is not ourselves but others. And it's hard because the world is teaching us, me, myself, and I. What can I do for myself? Or sometimes even if we have to make a decision, even with our own spouse, we feel like, wait, what's in it for me? Or, maybe I shouldn't give, all my life to this thing. Maybe I should save some for myself. Maybe I should, save a little something for me. I should love myself first. I need to take care of myself. But that's not what true love is, that God is calling us to do. We have to recognize that putting others first can be bothersome or inconvenient for us, but that's also what God did for us. Another thing, the last one, that love is that love is not manipulative. You manipulate when you give love as a reward or withdraw love as a punishment from someone. We've heard of all these shows that's out these days about dating and marriage. I can't believe The Bachelor and The Bachelorette is on for, the 20th, 25th season. I can't believe it, that, in order to find your true love, you're going to have to let the cameras follow you around as you date all the other 25 people. At one point, there was even this show called The Choice, where I think it was only on for like a couple of seasons, but the point of that show was, it was kind of like the components of The Voice, except it was the guys, by just listening to what the girls are promising they can do for the guys, that's how they choose them. And so, ridiculous, right? And sometimes we laugh and think, oh, it doesn't apply to me, my kid's not like that, or I'm not like that. But as the world becomes more and more geared towards these kind of shows, we become drawn to it without even realizing it. We do become desensitized, and unconsciously we start accepting these things as normal. So we have to be careful about that as well. Because love is so powerful, people are tempted to use it that way. But that's a very conditional form of love, and again, it's not the kind of love that God is calling us to do. So I talked about the 5 kind of main descriptions of what love is not. So hopefully that will help us define what Christian love is. What did God really mean when He said love? Love your neighbors or love God. Well, the answer can be found in John chapter 15, verse 9 through 10. It says, "Just as the Father has loved me, I have also loved you. Abide in my love, and if you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in His love." So there's that mutual definition of love, and He's really truly showing us the way, and really wanting us to follow His example. Very strong definition of how we're supposed to love. So there can be no Christian love apart from righteousness. Loving is not compatible with, and that was mentioned by Sister Shirley on the first talk, from sinning. And we learned it too from last week's talk, repentance and faith. We can't say that we're repenting from our sins and not commit to a journey of, or to commit to a faithful journey to holiness, right? Those two always have to come together. Because the world has complicated love so much that it really sets us apart from God. As a result, what are we facing right now? We're facing broken families. We're facing a really large very high divorce rate, right? We have wars going on all over many parts of the world. We have increased mortality from heinous crimes, right? We have abortion that we face. We have an immoral media that's dominating our TVs and other forms of communication. We have corruption. We have poverty. But Jesus was specific about how we are supposed to love one another. In John chapter 15, verse 12, he says, "This is my commandment, that you love one another just as I have loved you." Again, I'm going to keep repeating it, that really God is just defining our love just as how He did it for us. And so it's that mutual responsibility to respond to that kind of love. And how did He love? He loved by a self-sacrificial love. And again, the cross, no matter what kind of crucifix you look at, it really describes the same thing. It's a self-sacrificial love. For no one has greater love than to lay down one's life for one's friends. It's not just giving our time to express our love, brothers and sisters. It's not just imparting wisdom or knowledge to others. It's not just praying for others, actually. It's actually dying for others. Can you imagine that? Dying for others. I mean, right now, who among you can sincerely say, "I'll die for you"? Or, my wife, my husband, "I will die for you." Can we even readily say that right now, even to our spouse? Hard, right? But He did it for us. He did it for us. And we're really not, most of us are really not called to have to die for others. So then how can we translate this kind of love, this self-sacrificial love, into practical everyday terms? Well, the answer can be found in John chapter 13, verses 1 through 5. Can somebody help me read this just so I could drink water too? Somebody? Brother Anthony, do you want to do it?
Yeah. Trial.
Now before the feast of the Passover, Jesus, knowing that his hour had come that he would depart out of the world to the Father, having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. Doing supper, the devil, having already put into the heart of Judas Iscariot, the son of Simon, to betray him, Jesus, knowing that the Father has given all things into his hand, and that he had come forth from God and was going back to God, got up from supper and laid aside his garment, taking an hour, he girded himself, then he poured water into the basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel with which he was girded.
Thank you so much. Now, that's a very familiar scene, right? We're reminded about this particular passage every what? Lent, right? During Lent. Because what Jesus did was most unusual because it's actually a task of the lowest slave. Can you imagine? It was during that time, it was just a task of a lowest slave. And even now, I'm not sure, what is even considered the lowest slave in our time? Right? What's the lowest, like even perhaps the people with even with the minimum salaries won't even do washing of the feet anymore, right? The way he did, at least. But yet he did it. Such humility he has. Such great love for us. Thank you, brother and sister. I got a little gift for you. Well, now you're gonna have to volunteer, right? So you know. So dying on the cross was not only the example that Jesus gave. He demonstrated Christian love in service love as well. And when he finished, after this particular scene, he finished. He told everybody. He told all the disciples to do likewise. In John chapter 13, verses 14 through 15, it says, "If I then, the Lord and the teacher, washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I gave you an example that you should also do as I did to you. Every year during Lent, we are reminded of this, brothers and sisters, and it's a constant reminder calling each and every one of us to love the same way as Jesus did. Christian love is a committed service. In Galatians chapter 5, verses 13 through 14, it says, so Christian love is a committed service. Like I mentioned in talk number 5, Sister Shirley said we have free will. We were given that free will. So we have to use that. We have to use that commitment to love the way God wants us. And surely, brothers and sisters, you know, I may be in the same journey as you are, and I know I'm imperfect as well. But I just know that the promise of heaven is where we find true joy, and the true joy that awaits for us is in heaven. Then, so after we've defined what the components of true love is, as God defined it for us, we want to know who is our neighbor. You ever wonder who your neighbor is? Can you choose who to love? Not really. It's really not just the neighbors that we have, our immediate neighbors in our neighborhoods. It's really everybody. It's kind of like in Luke chapter 10, verse 29. It's that story where, and I'm going to read it real quick. But wishing to justify himself, he said to Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" Jesus replied and said, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell among robbers. And they stripped him and beat him and went away, leaving him half dead. And by chance a priest was going down on that road, and when he saw him, he passed by on the other side. Likewise, a Levite, when he came to the place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan, who was on a journey, came up to him, and when he saw him, he felt compassion, and came to him and bandaged up his wounds, pouring oil and wine on them. And he put him in his own beast, and brought him to an inn, and took care of him. On the next day, he took out two then and gave them to the innkeeper, and said, 'Take care of him, and whatever more you spend, when I return, I will repay you.' Which one of these three do you think proved to be a neighbor to the man who fell into the robber's hands?" And he said, "The one who showed mercy toward him." Then Jesus said, "Go and do the same." So what was the big deal about this story is that the Jews really hated the Samaritans because they intermarried among the Gentiles back in that time. And so it was really a remarkable thing to see that a Samaritan was actually the one who felt the compassion towards the Jew. So really, what it's describing to all of us, brothers and sisters, is that we really can't choose who to love. We are called to love even the ones that we hate the most, and probably the hardest call for love are the ones that we don't like, are the ones who are not responding with the same kind of love that we have. So really, the implication for us is that all men need our help as our neighbors. Who needs help is our neighbor. Sometimes we hear about helping the needy, right? And we get so overwhelmed sometimes, I think. We don't know where to start. Sometimes we're even doubting if our help is truly going to the right place. You know, those things come into our mind whenever we have to help some other people. But like I said, the implication of that particular long verse from the Bible is that our neighbor is anyone who needs our help. It includes the most immediate of our families and our friends, our co-workers, basically anyone who is in need. And sometimes it's really not material what they need. Sometimes he or she could just be someone who's needing some emotional support, maybe a spiritual need. You know, the world has really taught us to